It's become an election issue for both the Liberals and Conservatives, with the Liberal public safety plan including broadening support for police and CBSA officers and criminal code changes making it harder for some to get bail. While the Conservative crime platform includes allowing consecutive life sentences for committing multiple murders and mandatory sentences if convicted of 3 serious offenses. Professor Irvin Waller studies how governments can help prevent violent crime, and he joins us now. Thank you for making time for us this morning, Professor.
Thank you.
You study something that has been a pretty popular topic on the campaign trail, and frankly, that we've heard from a lot of Canadians that they're concerned about: crime and violent crime. What do you see as the underlying factors in why we've seen this increase in Canada that has so many Canadians concerned?
Well, I think it's important that we are concerned because there's been a 50% increase in the homicide rates in the last decade, and we're also talking about a epidemic in intimate partner violence. Sadly, we don't know precisely why there's been these increases. We know that gun crime has probably gone up as drug dealing has gone up, particularly around fentanyl, and as handguns have been coming across the border from the US. We also know that poverty probably has quite a bit to do with it. And we know that there's a lot of homeless, and some of those homeless who are mentally ill are involved in assaults and worse.
In your research, what is effective in trying to bring down crime rates that's been tried in other countries?
That's the key question, and we know a lot about how to reduce those violence rates given the experience, particularly of the UK and a few US cities. So Glasgow in the 2000s decided to reduce street violence. It was mainly knives, not guns. And they basically sent out street workers to tackle the young men most involved in violence and get them back into school, get them job training and jobs. And more recently, the UK has cloned that because Glasgow got a 50% reduction within 3 years. That's 5-0.
Wow.
And the UK is doing this across the country, like we should be doing it here. And they're getting about 25%, but I think they will do better over time. And then you have to look at Boston. The mayor of Boston in 2022 promised a 20% reduction within 3 years. She brought together folk who were in the neighborhoods where there was a lot of violence. She brought the heads of education and social services and policing, and she brought some folk like me who know what actually works, and she got a 50% reduction within 2 years. So we need to learn from these, and the federal government very definitely has a role to play in making those things happen.
There are people who say, you know, after the Black Lives Matter movement and the riots that we saw in the United States and the protests, there was a lot of discussion around moving away from investing in policing and moving towards community policing, mental health programs, education. People look at that and they say, but the rates of crime have gone up. It doesn't work. Why do you think that is? Is it the programs you're talking about were not introduced properly in that, we're not funded properly in that? Because I think that's where you hear the concern towards people turning back towards more money for police, longer sentences. They feel that that shift did not succeed in bringing down violent crime.
In this election, we see posturing on both sides of the leading contenders. The Conservatives are going back to basically Harper policies. These were not changed very much by the Liberals until the end, and it's clear that they're not working. If you look at the Liberals, they basically continued Harper's increases in salaries for police officers. We haven't actually got a whole lot more police officers, but they're better paid. And as you just said, violent crime has gone up. The federal government, with Harper, actually had a small crime prevention program, and the Liberals have continued that small crime prevention program. But you can't reduce the homicide rate in Toronto or your favorite city in Canada by one or two $1 million projects. We're spending somewhere between $25 and $30 billion on reacting to crime. Most of that is going to policing, and some of it's going to prisons. And we're just not doing the things that will actually stop it. So if we could get, I would like to see Canada spending roughly 5% of that $30 billion on prevention. And the federal government doesn't have to spend all of it. The provinces have to come up with money. But the federal government can lead.
We often hear about some of these crimes that are committed by people who are out on bail or probation, that they're wanted. They're wanted for breaches. They have other warrants on them, but they haven't been picked up. And that's where people say more money for policing. I'm curious your solution to deal with that small number of the violent repeat offenders who are out, but who pose a significant threat to society.
We're doing this interview very close to a place called Renfrew, where a guy killed 3 of his ex-girlfriends in one day. What is interesting to me about that tragedy is that we didn't just say, oh, well, we've got to change the criminal law or we've got to add more police. We actually had a coroner's inquiry that came up with specific recommendations about what we should be doing. And some of these were about policing and parole, but a very important number were about prevention. So we need to pay attention to that. In Canada, the most spectacular and horrific killing occurred in Nova Scotia, in Port-au-Pic, where 22 or so people were killed. And there was also a mass casualty commission, and that has recommended some things about policing and guns. That guy, by the way, got his guns from the US illegally. But it also talks about prevention. So we need to get on with prevention, and if you actually invest in the sorts of things that get results, like Glasgow and Boston, then you will reduce the number of these dangerous offenders, and you will reduce violent crime, you will reduce street crime, you will reduce the petty crime, you will reduce violence against women. The logic is, in my view, compelling, but somehow it doesn't get through to politicians in election time.
Professor Waller, thank you so much for sitting down with us today and sharing this information with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your interest in this issue.